Okay, we can start. We'll
Hi.
start. We'll start with a short prayer, and then we'll move right to the agenda. Flora, talking about what in the world is going on in Pennsylvania and what can we possibly achieve. So the reading that I have for tonight is it's stated in the Bible, do not eat from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. On that day you shall eat of it, you shall surely die. That comes from Genesis chapter 2. By eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam changed the king's laws. He abandoned the tree of life in which everything is perfect and upon which faith depends. Adam's trespass shattered the soul of the world. All of creation became separated from the Creator and humanity separated from nature. From a Kabbalistic or a mystical point of view, Adam's transgression testifies to the awesome power of that humanity holds. It is humanity that is primarily responsible for the state of nature and the cosmos. Just as humanity holds the capacity to spoil the creation, humanity also holds the possibility to heal and restore it. The world becomes whole when people take seriously the divine law and the obligation to fix the world. That's what our mission is to try to fix the world. And we're going to start with trying to fix Pennsylvania. And we know there's a lot wrong with Pennsylvania. So Flora is somebody that I have known for years now. She works for PennEnvironment and she's a field organizer. She's extremely knowledgeable, hardworking. And she will be able to give us the inside scoop if anybody can. So I appreciate everybody being patient and coming tonight. So take it away for us, Flora, please.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. And thank you everyone for being here and having me today. Really happy to join you all. As Phyllis said, my name's Flora. I'm the field director with PennEnvironment. And for those of you who aren't familiar, we're a statewide citizen-based environmental advocacy nonprofit. And we work to make sure everyone has clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, protected public lands to enjoy, and the reason we're here today, a safe and livable climate to call home. So again, thank you for having me here today and for all the work all you do to build a better world and protect our environment. And of course, I know a big reason we're all here today is because we all know the dangers that, climate pollution, air pollution pose to all of us and our health. We see the impacts of the climate crisis all around us here in Pennsylvania and around the world, but we're also here today because we know that it doesn't have to be this way. The science is very clear. We can stop the worst impacts of climate change, clean up our air, and protect our health by slashing climate pollution, moving away from dirty, dangerous fossil fuels towards a renewable energy, clean energy future. And thanks in part to a lot of continued activism and advocacy of everyone over the state, partners around the country, the last 2 years really did see some historic investments in climate action. And so before we get into, what's to come at the state level, I wanted to take a second first to talk about some progress that we have seen. So I'm sure folks know that we had two big pieces of environmental legislation pass Congress over the last 2 years. So first, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which included major investments to improve transportation and power infrastructure, with funding to support things like expanding electric vehicle charging networks here in Pennsylvania and around the country, record investments in public rail and public transit, walking and biking infrastructure, increased funding for electric school buses and electric transit buses, funding to improve energy efficiency, and more. And then last summer, the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law, and that was the largest investment in climate action and clean energy that's ever been passed in U.S. history. It includes hundreds of billions of dollars in tax credits, incentives, and other programs to help people, put solar on their roofs, buy an electric vehicle or an electric heat pump, make their homes more energy efficient, and more, which should, improve energy efficiency, reduce air pollution, and slash greenhouse gases. So good for our wallets and our planet. And I wanted to start there before we get into the state level stuff and mention these bills for two reasons. And the first is that a big focus of ours this year is really on making sure these programs are successful. So in order to actually see the improvements of energy efficiency, the growth of clean energy, the lowering of climate pollution that's touted in both of these bills, we need to make sure that people are actually taking advantage of these programs. And unfortunately, most Americans don't have any idea what the Inflation Reduction Act is, or if they've heard of it, they're not sure what it means or what it means for them in their lives. And so a big part of PennEnvironment's work this year, and a lot of groups across the state, I know PA IPL is working on this too, will be making sure that everyday Pennsylvanians across the state know, what clean energy and energy efficiency tax credits and rebates and incentives are available to them and how and when they can take advantage. And some of this stuff is still a little bit unclear. These programs will come online as the year goes on. So certainly we'll keep folks updated. But I wanted to share two resources right now, and I'll just keep sharing some stuff in the chat. This kind of gives an overview of what incentives are available. And then our partners in Environment America are also going a little more into details about how, you can electrify your home or, take advantage of some of this stuff. So we'll be spreading that information for all of you. I'd encourage you to think about, how you could take advantage of these credits or talk to friends and family about it, because the more that we can do that, the more we'll actually see the energy efficiency improvements and growth in clean energy that we need. So making sure elected officials at every level are helping to share that information is also helpful. And we also need to make sure that school districts and local governments know how they can take advantage of these programs as well, like grants to electrify their school bus fleets or applying for electric vehicle charging stations in their municipality or county. So when those things open, we also want to make sure they're taking advantage. We'll be doing that, but I just wanted to flag that as a big focus of this year, because we're only going to see, the 40% reduction in climate pollution that the Inflation Reduction Act promises if we take advantage of these programs. So that public education piece is really critical. And, for our climate, but also for helping to kind of usher in this new era of clean energy that we need to see in the state, where it keeps getting cheaper and more accessible, where more of our neighbors and families and friends are taking advantage, becomes more popular. And that leads me to the second reason I wanted to start talking about this, which is that, a couple of years ago, passing a bill like the Inflation Reduction Act was not politically possible at the federal level. But thanks to organizing and activism of folks here on this call, across the state, across the country, Congress did pass this, the largest investment in climate action, clean energy we've ever seen. So I personally feel a renewed sense of hope. I think this bill will help expand clean energy in a way, making it cheaper and more popular. But I think at the same time, most people, even President Biden in the State of the Union last week, understand that there is still more work to do. So I think we can kind of use this bill passing and build on some of this momentum at the federal level to help springboard that into further strong policies to tackle climate change. So using this kind of momentum to push for bolder climate action at the federal, but also state, local level on the scale and timeline that we need. And one example of how we can do that federally, again, before I go into the state stuff, is that we all are going to be focusing on encouraging the Biden administration to lower emissions even further through a set of administrative action. So given the likely gridlock in Congress, in the US Congress, it'll be pretty difficult to pass big climate bills that way. But President Biden, EPA Administrator Reagan have said that they want to keep tackling climate change and meet their goal of cutting emissions in half by 2030. And so to do that, there's about a dozen or so policies at the EPA and other administrative agencies that they can strengthen that'll help us lower climate and air pollution. But we know that even though they want to do that, even though this is good for our health, will save lives, will help limit climate pollution, they will face some industry opposition. So given Pennsylvania's national political importance, especially in a Biden re-election year, next year potentially, our reputation as a fossil fuel state, it's really important for people across the state to weigh in on these rules. Because if we can show widespread support from Pennsylvanians to make these rules and protections as strong as possible, it kind of gives the EPA the cover that they need to make these rules as strong as possible. So we're working with PA IPL and other groups to collect public comments, engage, all of you in testifying and submitting comments, writing letters to the editor, getting local officials and group leaders to make comments, raising visibility in the media. So it's very clear that Pennsylvanians want these rules and protections to be as strong as possible, to lower as much climate pollution as possible, to protect our health as much as possible. And there's a public comment period that's open right now focused on limiting harmful soot pollution. I'm not going to go into all of the details of that now, but if you want to make a public comment about that, you can add your name to PennEnvironment. I just put it in the chat. Again, advocating for stronger soot pollution. If you click on that, you can read a little bit more about it as well. And then we're also hosting a webinar. PA IPL is partnering on that with us, as well as a ton of other groups across the state, on Thursday, March 9th, where we'll go into all the details about soot pollution, how it impacts our health and climate, what this rule means, what it says, why it needs to be stronger, how to make your voice heard. So mark your calendars. That'll be on March 9th at 6. I don't have an RSVP link yet, but I'll send that around. So that being said, there's definitely opportunities to help lower climate pollution by taking advantage of the IRA and by weighing in on some of these EPA rulemakings of the next 2 years. And both of those things really should help us with cutting climate pollution in half by 2030. But of course, we also want to make progress at the state level. That federal action is not enough. And we do have some opportunities here at the state level to push forward bills in a way that hasn't been possible the last few years. But as Phyllis was alluding to, it still is pretty tricky to actually get that done. So I'm going to move now to talk a little bit about what's going on at the state level. And I'm sure you know some of this, but want to start with a little bit of political background. So of course, we have a new governor, Josh Shapiro. He is pretty pro-environment, more so than governors in the past, and he did win by a pretty large margin. So we should have some political capital to spend on protecting our environment and climate as a first-term governor. And our executive director, David Mazur, was on the transition team, a lot of our friends in the environmental movement, and we're trying to, encourage him to set a pro-climate agenda. And in general, making sure he's hearing from folks is good, because he is certainly hearing from the fracking industry and natural gas industry who don't want him to do those things. So certainly, I have faith that he wants to do the right thing, but given the politics in the state, it's always tricky. So the more he hears from people, we want both climate action, the better. In terms of the legislature, we finally have a democratically controlled state house for the first time in 15 years, which is pretty exciting. Even though it's a very small margin, there's a few things that means for us. So Democrats controlling the process in 2 of the 3 chambers mean that there's more leverage on some bigger picture policies. We should have more environmentally friendly legislators, more green champions, pro-environment legislators in leadership, heading up committees like the Environment Committee or Consumer Affairs Committee, where some of these environmental bills go, where, the past several years, they just haven't even ever gotten called up for a vote. We should have good people leading those committees who, at the very least, can call them up for a vote or hold hearings on them. It should also mean that we'll be able to spend less time kind of on defense of really bad bills that kept coming up the last few years, where, we were fighting tooth and nail to stop, some of the worst climate bills or environmental bills from happening. We should be able to spend less time on some of that defense, because some of those bills hopefully just won't even come up in the House at all, which should mean that we'll have more time to move good policy forward. However, the state Senate is still under Republican control. So in order to move anything forward, it will be really critical to work across the aisle and build support for clean energy and energy efficiency bills that can pass in a Republican Senate, and build support from the Democratic majority in the House, and stuff that the governor likes and wants to be supportive as well. So it is going to still be kind of some triangulation and figuring out what those policies are. And I think that it could look a few different ways. So we could find a bipartisan bill, and I'll talk about a few examples of these in a minute. There likely will be a few bipartisan bills where we can get a Republican senator and a Democratic House member to work together. I know it seems hard, but there's a few areas where that could be the case. so that they can pass in both places and get signed into law. It could be a situation where we have a bill that passes the state house at least and moves to the Senate. So it's part of the conversation where it can then be positioned for some horse trading or get included in some must-pass bills like the budget. So if something passes the House, it seems popular, people want it, the governor likes it, it can possibly be included in a budget deal or negotiation, even if it can't pass the Senate. So there's a few ways these things can move forward, but we do need to keep an eye on bipartisanship or transpartisanship to get this stuff to the finish line. And so there's a few things specifically we have an eye on. The first, which some of you may have heard about, is an effort to improve the state's alternative energy portfolio standard to require 30% clean energy by 2030. We're at like 8% clean energy in Pennsylvania right now. So that would be a huge jump in the right direction. And Governor Shapiro ran on wanting to do that, a 30 by 30 mandate. He made that pretty central to his campaign, one of his top priorities in office. But it's not a done deal. Again, he'll definitely face opposition in the Senate. So a few things there. We'll want to make sure that any deal is really, that 30% is actually clean, renewable energy in that tier 1 requirement to make sure that it gets done without expanding fossil fuels as part of the deal. A lot of that will probably happen during inside negotiations, which, we hope to be part of in a small way. But we will also be making sure there is a lot of public support and visibility for a clean energy transition for 30 by 30 on the outside. And as this stuff starts to come up, I'll certainly let people know. One thing, and I'll mention this again, is that given all the shenanigans in the state house the last month or so, things are a little bit behind. So nothing has really been moving yet. Most bills don't have even co-sponsorship memos out, yet alone being introduced. So it's a little hard to engage. But as these things start to move, we'll certainly let people know. But one way that we're going to continue showing support for like 30 by 30 for a clean energy transition is that at PennEnvironment, one of our priorities continues to be organizing around our bill for 100% renewable energy. That's because this is what the science says we need to do to stop the worst impacts of climate change, protect our environment and our health. We have the technology, we're just missing the political will. So we think of this bill not as something that will pass a Republican state Senate, but something that can be kind of an organizing tool where we can draw a bright line in the sand, show this is where we need to go, build support for that, build visibility around that, which should help things like 30 by 30 or other short, term bills get done as well as kind of stepping stones towards that vision. So we're working with Rep Chris Rabb in Mount Airy, Senators Amanda Capoletti and Katie Muth from Montco to introduce that again. And again, we don't think it'll pass, but do think showing support for that can kind of help push the politics forward. Two other bills I want to flag. One is that Representative Jen O'Mara from Delaware County is working on a bill to adopt energy efficiency standards for commonly used appliances and household products, which can help lower our energy and water use, air, water, climate pollution. That's something that we're hoping she can find a Republican in the Senate to work with and, build enough support to get it passed. It had a lot of bipartisan support last session and really does have a pretty big impact in terms of energy efficiency and climate pollution reduction. So that's something I'll be keeping my eye on, let people know. And I also hear from our friends in more of the solar groups like Vote Solar or the Philadelphia Solar Energy Authority and some of the other solar groups that they're trying to work on a community solar bill and get that to the finish line to make community solar legal in Pennsylvania again, either as a standalone bill or as part of the kind of AEPS 30 by 30 deal. Those are just a few examples of some of the climate and clean energy bills we hope to see. Again, none of these bills are introduced yet. Most don't have co-sponsorship memos out yet, but this is just the beginning of a 2-year legislative session. So over the next, 22 months, there's a lot of opportunities to move this stuff forward. And as things do get introduced, we'll let people know, certainly, because you all emailing or calling your elected officials, state rep and state senator, and asking them to co-sponsor this stuff when the co-sponsorship memos are out, or vote for it if a House vote comes up, or in general, making your voice heard to the governor. You want him to prioritize climate action. All of that is helpful. And, you know, we will keep people updated as those opportunities arise. I also think, I don't have much information about this, but I know some of you have joined PennEnvironment before for our annual Citizen Lobby Day, where we set up meetings with folks. For your state reps and state senators, we'll be talking about some of these bills and whatever else is moving. Then it's likely going to be on June 8th, but more information is to come on that as well. If people are interested, the last link I'm going to share is PennEnvironment's legislative agenda in the chat, because a lot of the stuff with the bill numbers from last session are written out there, but not just for climate, for other issues as well. And so I think, to sum it up, we want to be doing what we can with what we have first, taking advantage of the IRA incentives, making sure people, local elected officials, county officials, school districts, your neighbors and friends know how to take advantage, so we can start spurring clean energy and energy efficiency here. We'll want to engage on these EPA rules like the soot rule and make sure those are as strong as possible, because that'll help us limit carbon pollution, climate pollution, air pollution in the short term. And then at the state level, whatever we can move with this, both, you know, Democratic House and Republican Senate, to find consensus, get it to the finish line. We certainly will need everyone making your voices heard for that too. This is just the beginning of the legislative session. So again, I expect there to be other bills that fall in these categories that might pop up, where some of this stuff might start moving, but this is kind of just what to expect moving forward. But yeah, happy to answer any questions folks have about any of this stuff.
So who has questions?
I know I was a lot of information. So if I said anything too that people don't like, I used a term or something you're not sure about.
I see Nancy and I see Rob. I don't think you're Rob, but you say Rob on your name. Nancy.
Hi. So I know that quite a bit of money is available in Pennsylvania for the IRA, as well as Build Back Better. Is there any risk of the Pennsylvania legislation monkey, for lack of a better word, monkeying around with that money? And how do we ensure that that money is used in the way it is intended for the people it's intended for?
Yes, that's a great question. I want to say that it's a little bit complicated because there's kind of different pots of money that work in different ways. So some of the programs, it's like federal funding that then, you know, school districts or municipalities can apply to directly, or like state funding, but that's very specifically earmarked for things like the charging stations or electric vehicles that then school districts, again, local municipalities can apply for. So I think that doesn't have as much of a risk of it getting like pulled into the general fund or something. I think the risk there is just people not taking advantage of it. We're already actually seeing this with some Build Back Better money in Philly that we've gotten, and our council, like city council, is just not spending it. So yeah, which is crazy. So we like have, you know, suggestions for things that the schools can do, right? We actually passed a bill I don't know if anyone's in Philly, but we worked with council member Helen Gim last summer to pass a bill to get lead out of school drinking water, to put lead filtering hydration stations in all the schools. And that was even a fight, even though it was such a small percentage of this money. So I hear that the city has money that they aren't spending. That's a big problem to me. I do think that there will be a chance that some of this money comes to the state. And I'm actually not sure. Based on what's happened in the past in Pennsylvania, we have certainly seen the legislature raid kind of funds for the environment and put it in the general fund, which is always a risk. I would hope with a Democratic state house now that won't happen as much, or that the programs are so specific that it can't. But I'm actually not totally sure. So I think as more information comes out about these programs and how people need to apply for them or use them, it'll be a little more clear. And then some of that money is things that individuals directly can take advantage of.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm Margaret, and I'm using my husband's laptop. I was speaking with a friend who's eager to put solar on his house, but he has no idea how to do it. And I think this is the problem for a lot of people. What he said is, what we need is an energy store we can go to in our towns that you can just walk in, get advice, shop for stuff, see, learn how it all works. And I was talking to my niece who happens to live in Scotland, and she said, in Scotland, they have Home Energy Scotland, where you can call up and get advice. They'll even have somebody come to your house and check out, after you submit the basic information about utility and construction of your house, etc. But it seems like people are eager, but they don't know how to jump in, and they don't happen to have a friend necessarily who's done it before who can instruct them. And I just think it might be, I don't know if there's funding that could be directed that way so that it makes it more accessible to the average person.
You're in luck if you live in Southeast Pennsylvania, because Southeast Pennsylvania has an organization that's called Solarize Southeast Pennsylvania. It's a bunch of people who know the solar industry. It's some installers. It's people who have solar on their roofs. And they will be happy to recommend an installer to you that they vetted. They'll also be happy to do a check with your house using the technology they have to see whether or not it's feasible. And they can help walk you through the process of getting all the paperwork done. So, yep, that's it. Solarize Southeast Pennsylvania. Does it exist? The rest of the state, Flora, do you know?
I have mostly heard about it in Southeast PA, like Solarize Delco, so but there are cool groups in other places. If you're in Northeast PA, I'll find this link. There's a group called Seeds that helps with solar, and then the PAPowerswitch.com is a statewide resource from the public utility that does at least compile different options for solar installers and things. So for different parts of the state, that could be a good one. And this, Seeds. If you happen to be in Northeast PA or have friends there, I think Seeds could be a resource.
There's also Sage Energy, which gives lots of advice on solar. They list lots of installers, and they also talk about how you can get a loan for solar energy. I used them to get the loan that I took out for solar energy. And believe it or not, I actually got my loan from the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. I've never lived in Vermont. I've never been an employee, but they were listed for Pennsylvania as this is appropriate. It was alphabetical, and it was the last one down. And I called them up and I said, I'm sure this is a mistake. I live in Pennsylvania. They said, no, for a $50 fee or $100 fee, you can become a member of our credit union, and it's put in a bank account. And it's like, okay. And they were wonderful to work with. Very small town, Vermont, like you get the right people at the same time. And the rate was excellent. So I can put that in the chat.
Yeah, but to answer your question, we definitely do need more or your statement, we definitely do need more resources too. And it would be cool to have a resource like that. And then in terms of the actual tax credit stuff, the first link I put in the chat, the energy.gov link, I think is pretty helpful in like what things are available for credits and how you do it for this like next tax season.
Right.
And then Steve in the chat, I mean, that question is like the crux of our whole issue here. Because of course, you'd hope that elected officials want to protect our air and water and climate, But yeah, so many either have direct investments in the fracking industry, direct ties, or get huge campaign contributions. And therefore, and not just from the fracking industry, but also, you know, the building trades, which largely in Pennsylvania are pro-fossil fuel. And so you do see, therefore, things like huge, like multi-billion-dollar handouts to the fracking to plastics industry that passed at the end of last year, or, you know, fighting tooth and nail to keep us out of the regional greenhouse gas initiative. So my one hope, and to be honest, it's not even a partisan divide, where certainly you have some, I mean, there's very few left now, but like some Southeast or in Pennsylvania Republicans who are better on the environment than some Democrats that are more closely into the fracking, like fossil fuel part of the state. I'm hopeful that with the Democratic House majority, we'll have a little bit less of that fighting, those like bad bill defense, as I said, and the ability to move some stuff forward. I think that my hope is that in the state Senate, we don't need everyone to vote with us. You know, it's okay if like a lot of the pro-fossil fuel Republicans don't. We just need a majority, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find the votes for some of this stuff. You know, there are Republican senators that like the idea of offshore wind in Lake Erie, or who do want to be more energy efficient, who do, you know, think that people should have solar, like if they want, you know, so like community solar should be legal. So there is some bipartisan support for some of these clean energy policies, even if we can't get to the big vision yet that we want. But certainly outside of the legislative cycle, you know, campaign finance reform issues are huge, and voting for pro-environmental candidates and things continue to be important.
So Steve, I'm intrigued by your comment in the chat that you got solar for free from Tesla. Can you tell us how that happened?
Actually, it happened one day when I was shopping for something else at Lowe's, and there was actually a representative of Tesla in the store asking if I wanted solar on my roof. And I signed up for them to come out and look at my house. They sent a whole team out to see if the direction of the house was accurate. They went up on the roof to see if the roofing tiles were new enough. They actually went up in the attic, a crawl space that I've never been up in, and checked to see if the structure was strong enough. And they installed it then at no cost. Now, I'm actually buying electricity through them, but I didn't have the money for the battery. This was free, and I figured I'm lowering my costs a little bit and making a positive change for the environment. So it was maybe not the best answer, but it was the one that was easy and free.
So you have a purchase power agreement with Tesla then?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you explain what a power purchase agreement is, or maybe Flora can do it? And I'm sure Dara can help out on this one too.
Yeah, I'll pass on that and let them do it. They probably can even do it better than me.
Okay.
Maybe I'll start, and then Dara, because it can fill us in. She's an expert. I think of power purchase agreements as, you know, the best thing to do is put solar on your own roof, or, you know, like if you're a municipality on your building. But when that's not feasible, another option is a power purchase agreement where you are purchasing power from renewable energy that's offsite. So I'm not sure how this works with Tesla. That's what I generally think of as a power purchase agreement.
Yeah, that obviously isn't an offsite in this case. Yeah.
Dara, get to Patricia.
So, hi, this is Dara Bortman. So a power purchase agreement is basically another type of lease. So basically, the company leased his roof and put solar panels on his roof, and then he's buying the electricity at a specific a specified cost per kilowatt hour out of those solar panels. Is that
Right.
how it works? Yeah.
Yes,
So it's usually like a 20-year contract.
that's correct.
And then you saved a couple cents per kilowatt hour. And it usually goes up about 3% a year, the rate. Is that?
Yeah, I haven't looked at exactly what the percentage is, but you know, probably gone up less than than the other utilities themselves, which have been going up faster than that. But that's a good description. And there are obviously times when I'm buying. I'm still hooked into MedEd, you know, which is my power supply, because that's required for times when you're not generating. But there are times when in the summer I'm getting very little from MedEd. It's almost all from solar off my roof.
Right. So, you know, there are pros and cons to purchasing versus leasing solar energy systems. There's a reason why Tesla put those panels on your roof for quote unquote for free. It's because they're making money off of your roof. So you are saving maybe a couple cents per kilowatt hour, but they're taking the federal tax credit on those panels, and a lease and a PPA can complicate a house sale if you decide to sell your house during the period of the PPA, because there's basically a third party that owns something on your roof.
Yeah.
So generally, yeah.
I was going to say I intend to age in place. So
yeah. So for older people who don't pay much in federal taxes anymore, maybe retired, living on a fixed income, a PPA can be a good option, especially if like Steve, you're going to be aging in place, because you can save a few cents per kilowatt hour. You're generating clean energy. And so it can be a good option. Generally, for most people, we recommend purchasing and then financing with a loan, which can create a similar financial benefit. You basically end up getting a loan, and the monthly loan payment is less than what you would have been paying the utility company. You get to take the federal tax credit, which is 30% of the cost of the system. You get the SRECs from the system, and you save a lot more money than just a couple cents per kilowatt hour. But that's not always feasible for everybody. And so in some situations, a PPA can make sense.
Yeah, I did this 5 years ago, so it's nothing current, and some of these other options certainly weren't available then.
There's a lot more financing options available now. In the last 5 years, there's a ton more.
I didn't hear that.
More flexible, lower rate, lower in work. So yeah, I mean, all the time prices keep coming down, options for financing keep getting better and better. And so it makes sense to do your research. I'm also on the board of the American Solar Energy Society, which is the oldest solar advocacy organization in the country. And if you go to our website, ases.org, ASES.org, there are some resources on there to help people with education about getting solar. We're working on generating more of those, but there's a great list of questions to ask any installer on there. And like I put in the chat, Mark and I are no longer in the business. We're not affiliated with any local installer anymore, but we're still happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And I put our email addresses in the chat.
Thank you,
Deborah. And just to clarify, I mean, my primary reason for doing it wasn't to save money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was because it was the right thing to do. So, yeah.
So Patricia's been waiting very patiently.
Now people can do both, though, which is great. Save money and do the right thing.
Patricia?
Finished with that? My question is, where is Pennsylvania now with RGGI? What is the status? What's happening with it? I had heard quite a while ago, before our past governor had left, that it had been signed off on, but there was some kind of a delay that was going to be happening. Can you fill us in on all of that?
Yes, that's a great question, Pat. And it is a little hard to answer. Basically, RGGI we did go through the regulatory process to join it and officially joined it. It was on the RGGI website for a minute, but because of legal challenges in the court system, we haven't actually been able to participate, which has been huge. Like, we just lost out on months of lowered air pollution, lowered carbon pollution, and a ton of money generated for the state, millions of dollars. So unfortunately, though, everyone's hands are kind of tied, because until it gets out of the courts, there's really not much for folks on the outside to do. I mean, we have done some press stuff for some letters to the editor, things to make it clear people want to join it, but it is just in the state court system. And so it's a little unclear what will happen. We're hopeful that the courts will rule in our favor and will officially join it, in which case I don't think that the governor would try to actually get us out of it. I think then it would just be more about how do we actually, what does it look like? How do we spend the money in a good way? If the court rules against it, then I really don't know what the next step is there. So we're all just kind of waiting to see right now, I think.
Any idea of the timeline for the court?
Thanks.
I haven't. I feel like every time I've heard a timeline, it's been wrong. So I don't know. But if I get any other inside information, I will pass it along.
Who took it to court?
Yes, that's a great question. There was two, and I'm not a lawyer, so let me see if I can find my resources here. So basically, hold on one second. There was two separate court cases, and one was the DEP, the Supreme Court, DEP versus, so Senate, the state Senate was one, intervening kind of against the DEP. So the LRB, which is the Legal Review Board of Bills, I think, at the state Senate, against DEP. And it gets confusing with injunctions of what, and then one was both in et al. Versus DEP, which is about the merits of the rule. So the first one was more about the process, like, is this allowed without the state legislature? This one was more about the merits of the rule, and I believe that is like a coal company. And that's the basic.
Do you know which court it's in? Is it in the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So it really could go either way, I would say. Other questions about anything? And if I hear more about RGGI, I'll definitely let people know.
I have a couple questions.
Actually, sorry, Phyllis, can I say one more thing first?
Sure.
One thing that I think people are worried about is that there will be some kind of negotiating around not joining RGGI and instead doing the AEPS 30 by 30 renewable energy standards. And so we would want to do both things, like both are good, but we need both and more. So it's really not like one's about reducing carbon pollution, one's about spurring clean energy, and we do need both. So I'm a little bit worried about that happening too, but we'll have to see. I'm sorry, Phyllis, what was your question?
Does anybody else have a question before I ask mine? So my question has to do with community solar and community choice aggregate. I heard that some places in Pennsylvania are allowing it. Like if you live in a borough, you're allowed to install one of those. But if you don't live in a borough, which is not most of Pennsylvanians, you can't. Can you clarify that a little bit, please? Thanks.
I'm not sure. I haven't heard about that. I'm sorry.
But maybe you can just talk about community solar,
yeah.
community choice aggregate.
Yeah, so community solar is the idea that, you know, if you can't put solar on your own roof, you're a renter or your roof doesn't allow it, you know, but also that then you can, you know, go in on solar kind of as a group. It could also, though, be like putting solar in a community center on farms, but basically like community going in on both the costs and the benefits of solar together. Right now, that's illegal in Pennsylvania. So we want community solar to be legal so that people can take advantage of solar in different ways. More people can have access to it in a way that's affordable. And so I know there's been different kind of community solar bills being negotiated right now. And I'm sure that people that are solar experts could tell you more, but I haven't heard that, Phyllis. Someone that I recommend talking to is Elwyn Corby, who actually used to work at PennEnvironment several years ago. People might remember her, but she now works at Vote Solar, and she's been really involved in this. I'm going to put her email in the chat. I'm sure she doesn't mind, but she can help answer more of the specific solar policy questions, I bet.
So Vote Solar is an absolutely wonderful resource in general for, they're trying to get solar on the roofs of everybody, particularly people who can't afford to do it themselves. So thanks for that, reminding us about that. Bill.
I can offer a very brief description of the community choice aggregation. There was a webinar that a Quaker group, Eco Justice Collaborative, did back in January, and they talked about that as one of the things going on. Apparently, it has to do with the way the state law is written for chartering or the charters of boroughs. So this is something that's specific only to boroughs. It doesn't apply to cities. It doesn't apply to townships or other forms of municipal organization. But apparently a borough can, by a municipal resolution that the borough government, the council adopts, can specify that power for everybody in the borough, businesses, nonprofits, residents, everybody, will come from a renewable source. And then if people want to opt out of that, they can, but the default becomes acquisition of power from that renewable source. So essentially the borough has a power purchase agreement with a renewable energy provider. It could be wind, it could be solar. And then individuals who don't want to do that can opt out. And there are several attorneys here in Southeast Pennsylvania who are working with boroughs to explain to them this option and to sort of lobby to get them to do it for the people and the businesses in their borough. And I'm not sure if any have done it yet, but it's something that is being promoted. But right now, it's only available to boroughs. So if you live in a borough, I'll put my email in there. Attorney Baird Brown is one who has been working to promote this. He's an attorney who's done a lot of work in the energy sector. And I can, if you want to give me your email or send me an email, I'll put my email out there. I can get you Baird's contact information if you live in a borough and want to try to get your borough to pursue doing that community choice.
I heard that Narberth, I live in Lower Merion, which completely surrounds Narberth Borough, is working with that lawyer and is in the process of trying to develop a community choice aggregate.
Yeah, so it's limited, but it is an option if you happen. And I think Media is a borough, and I believe Media is starting to investigate whether they can do it. But Philadelphia can't do it. We're a city. A lot of townships can't do it because they're townships. So it's only for boroughs.
Patricia, you have another question.
Yes, I was just wondering, is community solar going to be cheaper than wind energy? I get mine from Green Mountain. If Philadelphia does go with community, is that going to be cheaper than Green Mountain wind energy?
I'm not sure. I think it depends on what it looks like, where and what the programs are, how many people opt into them. So I think it could depend.
So Patricia raised an excellent point without explaining it. She buys her energy from a third source. That means that although she gets PICO bills, because I know she's in Philly, she gets PICO bills, and if there's a power outage, she calls PICO, but PICO is actually buying the energy that goes into the grid from wind energy that she's buying from a third-party source. And she's chosen did you say Green Mountain? Yeah, Green Mountain, which is one of many. I'm not advocating for any of them. It's something that all Pennsylvanians can do if they pay their own electric bill. You can go onto the Pennsylvania Utility Power Commission, and they'll list all of the sources of energy you can buy. You can buy clean, you can buy non-clean, you can buy a percentage of clean, and it's best to check every one of them out real carefully. There are some non-reputable companies that are listed there. Mostly they're reputable. Call them up, check out the resource that check out what they say, and look out, see whether or not anybody has any bad comments about them by going independent. And then you'll find that you can actually be getting 100% clean energy with not much more money than what PICO or your electric company would be charging you. So it's definitely a resource for most people who can't afford to do solar, or who are having the ability because they're in an apartment building or a condo association or something of this nature. It's very doable, but it does take a little effort. All you have to do is when you decide you want to change, you call the company that you want to change to, and also ask them if they've got a better deal than what they list on the web. They often do. And then they'll you fill out a very brief questionnaire. You might even do it over the phone, and they do the paperwork to PICO or whoever your energy company is. So thanks for mentioning that, Patricia. That's a real important thing that everybody can do. Any other questions or comments? We've raised so much. This has been wonderful.
I don't know if anyone mentioned there's also renewable natural gas from Energy Co-op in the Philadelphia area. I don't know how far out that goes. It costs a little more though, but it's renewable.
So we usually end with an action statement. And Flora put in, among all of her emails, she put in, all of the things in the chat, she put in a petition. So if you want to tell us about the petition, and then any other actions that you would like to have, and we'll also see whether the official people from Pennsylvania Power and Light want to put in, ask for an action.
Yes, I would encourage everyone to click the link I just put back in the chat and make your voice heard for a stronger EPA soot rule, so we have the strongest possible standard. Right now, their proposal does not go far enough into making sure we're limiting harmful soot pollution. A stronger rule will save 4 times as many lives as their current version. And so I would definitely encourage you to add your name there. And again, we are having a webinar on March 9th to go more into detail. So I'm sure I'll send, people are on our list, but I'll send you information to share with the group because we'd love everyone to join that.
And do we have any actions from Pennsylvania Power and Light?
Yes, we have a link for any faith leaders who would like to submit a comment through us also regarding soot.
You want to identify yourself, please? People don't know you.
Oh yeah, I'm under a different name tonight. Sorry about that. I'm Rainika. I'm the Southwest coordinator for PA IPL, and usually my icon says Rainika, but my login information has me as Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. Here is that link for you.
And because we're also asking people to write comments in addition to signing petitions where you actually formulate them, I think Flora is going to be holding, is that what you're doing in the beginning of March?
Yes, we'll talk more about that then. So that'll be an opportunity to hear more about like the details of the rule and of soot pollution, its impacts on our health and climate. So just to be more well versed, and we'll also, have an action packet there for people to write their own comments, sample talking points, and that sort of thing. So yes, definitely the public comment period ends, I think, March 28th, March 27th. So that'll be on the 9th. So there'll still be time to write your own comment and make your voice heard.
I was actually thinking of devoting the meeting in March to that exact topic, but it doesn't seem like we need to duplicate. We can all go to the PennEnvironment one. It's going to be much better than what I would be able to pull together, I'm sure.
Yes, I would love for everyone to come. PA IPL is co-sponsoring it too, and a lot of other groups in the state. So it'll definitely be a good one.
This is the year that we're going to be writing to the EPA comments one after another. I think there's probably going to be one a month. The reason for that is that the EPA during a previous administration rolled back many, many regulations. And the regulations that were not rolled back are extremely old and really need to be updated. So January, we were asked to write comments about methane. February and March, we're asked to write comments about soot. And I can predict that there will be one a month, at least for this year, and maybe the next, as long as the EPA has the ability to regulate. And they have to be very specific, and they have to be on very many topics. So they're offering a public testimony period for each one of these, and they're offering people to submit online, and every organization that is trying to do this wants you to do it. And we had a discussion at the IPL board meeting last week, like, well, I'm a member of IPL, and I also am a member of PennEnvironment, and I'm a member of the Sierra Club, and they're all asking me to do it. And so just tell everybody that you've submitted a comment, even though it's triple counting you or 4 times counting you or whatever. But we're not interested in data integrity. We're interested in showing people that there are people that really care. So we're going to ask everybody to learn how to write comments. It's really very easy with the toolkits that are provided. But the most important thing is to put in your own personal story, how you have personally been affected. Somebody in your family has been affected by the issue. So if it's the soot issue, do you live close to a highway where the diesel trucks are just polluting all the time? Does your kid have asthma? Those type of stories are the stories that we want to put into these comments. Okay. So we will hopefully see all of you March 9th, correct? What time?
Yes, March 9th at 6. We're going to make materials really soon and share it around so folks can register and get the Zoom link. But it'll be March 9th, which is a Thursday at 6 p.m.
Okay, and that's how to write comments for soot, but really in general, how to do comments.
Yep, and details about soot specifically.
Great. Okay, any other questions or items that people want to be raising? Thank you all for coming. Thanks for being patient and for sharing so much great information. All of you are resources, and it's great that we can share together. So have a great week, and thank you very much. Thank you, Flora, especially.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.